Hey, how are you? This is Chad, and today we are going to be discussing who should be the one to do the ceremonial blessing and when it should be done. Now, if you've been following me in the last couple of videos, you would know that, you know, the art of blessing is the ability to empower others to prosper. And by doing this, you are empowering your children and or your friends to be the kind of person that they are meant to be. Primarily, your children when you are doing this particular ceremony. Now, what happens if there is not that blessing, that ability to bless? These people are being cursed. Well, guess what? They are left unfulfilled. There's no identity, and there is no prosperity that is taking place. And there's a lot of hurt and pain that is implanted within the person, and it restricts them from really becoming the kind of person that they are truly meant to be. So we're going to be discussing in this particular video is primarily with your children and not so much with the business side of things. But if you could take similar concepts and use it in your business, but primarily we're going to be talking about the family, who in the family is responsible for the blessing, when to have a ceremony to release your children into manhood or womanhood so that they have that identity for themselves that and also have to be empowered with purpose. So today we're going to be continuing to read from the book Barakah, A Parent's Guide to a Christian Bar Mitzvah, and we're going to be reading chapter 3, Who Should Bless and When. So this is going to be a little bit longer than the last chapter, but it's very important. I think you'll gain a lot of value from this, and you're really going to understand why uh, the Father is really who God uses to bless. But the chapter also touches on what happens if there isn't a father figure, whether they're absent physically or mentally or whatever. They don't want to be part of their kids. And it also steps into that particular area as well, so that those who are single moms, single parents, uh, they'll have an idea what to do, where to go, to ensure that their children are have a proper identity and a proper empowerment for to prosper. Okay, so chapter 3: Who should bless and when? You may wonder why I keep referring to the father's blessing at the time of puberty. What about the mother? The mother is also an important role player, but she is not the key role player at the time of puberty. God designed men and women with entirely different roles in the lives of their children. Ungodly people would like us to believe that there is no difference in the role of a mother and father in the life of a child. This is simply not the case. At the time of puberty, the father, not the mother, inherently has the voice of God or Satan to bless or curse his sons or daughters' manhood or womanhood. A mother was designed by God to fulfill two functions: one, birth, and two, nurture her children. Men were not designed to fulfill these two functions. Despite the movies you might see, men will never give birth to children. Women were physically and emotionally designed by God to fulfill these two functions. I believe form from birth up to the time of puberty, the mother is the key role player and the impartation of identity and destiny in love and security in the lives of her children. She is then to turn the children primarily over to the father at the time of puberty. The father is then designed by God to also fulfill two main functions. One, confirm gender identity, and two, release and destiny. Even in conception, it is the seed of the father that determines the gender of the child. Genetically, a girl is determined by two X chromosomes, while a boy is determined by an X and Y chromosome. Since the mother has two X chromosomes, she is only capable of contributing an X chromosome to the conception, while the father can contribute either an X or an Y, thus determining the gender of the child. God designed the father to determine and confirm gender identity. Fathers tend to focus their children outward, while mothers tend to focus their children inward. If you have recently noticed a difference in how fathers and mothers hold little children in public, you will have seen this difference in focus manifested. Most mothers hold their babies inward toward themselves in a nurturing sort of way. Most fathers hold their babies on the palm of their hand outward, showing the child the world and the world the child. Obviously, children need both parents. In teenage years, the father said, send him on a short midterm mission trip halfway around the world at age 13. The mother says, no, that's my baby. He'll get hurt. Again, we need both parents in our lives growing up. So at the time of puberty, the child needs the blessing of the father to confirm gender identity and to be released into adult destiny. This is why the devil fights so hard to remove the father from the lives of the children at the time of puberty. Several years ago, I was surprised as I read a study on divorce in the United States relative to the age of children. The result of the study were graphed as a bell curve as a characteristic of many sociological statistics. However, it was very interesting to note that the peak of the bell was at age 12 to 13 of the firstborn child, right at the age of puberty transition. In other words, more couples in the United States get divorced right at their firstborn child approaches age 12 to 13 than at any other time. If this isn't a scheme of the devil, then I don't know what is. Satan is intent on nullifying the effectiveness of the Father and the lives of of his children, particularly at this crucial age. Of course, divorce is not his only tactic. Satan will take the father effectively out of the children's lives through divorce, death, desertion, apathy, emotional insecurity, and unavailability, busyness, or ignorance. When the father is unavailable to impart into the lives of his children God's blessing of identity and destiny, then the children will go in search of it elsewhere. Satan is always happy to oblige them by sending them various surrogate fathers and role models who will impart a counterfeit blessing and release into adulthood. I believe that this is why God speaks through the prophet Malachi about turning the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. And he will turn the hearts of the fathers to the children, and the hearts of the children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the earth with a curse. Malachi 4 5 through 6. There is usually little problem with hearts of the mothers being turned toward their children. The problem primarily lies with the fathers. Our prisons and rehabilitation centers are full of fatherless sons and daughters. I remember hearing several years ago about a free giveaway program greeting card company did with Mother's Day cards in a state penitentiary. They offered free cards to anyone who would like one, and were quickly left with a long line of prisoners they had to turn away when the stock ran out. Since the program was so successful, the company decided a few weeks later to make the same offer in the same prison for Father's Day cards. This time, they brought 3 times as many cards so as to be sure not to run out. Much to their surprise, only 3 cards total were taken. It turned out that each of the prisoners in that facility, except 3, either had no viable relationship with the father or hated the father they had known. Why some fathers don't release blessing to their children. There are 3 main reasons that I have run into as to why some fathers don't bless their children at the time of puberty and release them into adulthood. The first reason is very simple: ignorance. Fathers have not been taught, nor did they understand the necessity of blessing in the lives of their children. Their own fathers did not do this for them, so they have not known the need to do this for their own children. A second reason fathers won't bless their children is due to their lack of understanding the need to separate identity from behavior in the lives of their children. When identity and behavior are fused in the mind of the father, then he will believe the lie that to bless the identity of his child is to condone the behavior of the child. Conversely, in an attempt to discipline the behavior of his child, he will concurrently curse the identity of the child. Is it right to bless a rebellious, misbehaving child? Certainly. A primary root of teenage rebellion is lack of parental blessing. We are meant to bless the person and discipline the behavior. One father remarked in response to this question: I bless him all night with a 2 by 4 upside the head. Thank God that He is able to separate our behavior from our identity. But God demonstrates His own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Romans 5:8. I can't think of a much greater blessing and confirmation of love than to die for another person. Because Jesus died for you and conveyed his approval and acceptance of you while you were still a rebel against him. Does this mean that he also accepted and approved of your sinful behavior? Of course not. He separated who you are, identity, from what you do, behavior. Control versus authority. When fathers fail to separate identity from behavior, they fall into the trap of either condoning wrong behavior in an attempt to bless the child or condoning the child in an attempt to discipline the behavior. When this happens, a father will tend to govern his family using the devil's system of government rather than God's. God and Satan govern people through 2 entirely different systems of government. I have come to call Satan's system of governing the system of control. God, on the other hand, governs through exercise of authority. Let me define these terms as I will use them here. Control is using the manipulative power of the soul to force, threaten, or intimidate others to do your will. The exercise of authority is honoring the personhood and free will choice of others by offering them choices with consequences. Control does not honor or, many times, even acknowledge the free will choice of others. The exercise of authority consistently honors the choices of others, but also consistently applies consequences to wrong choices. God has always honored the choices of people. He has never forced anyone to receive Jesus Christ. He offers choices with consequences. He may say, for example, choice A: to receive Jesus Christ will result in being in my presence in eternal life in heaven. Choice B: to reject Jesus Christ in your life will result in separation from me and eternal death in hell. I highly recommend choice A. It will be much better for you. However, the choice is yours. In Deuteronomy 30:19, God said, call heaven and earth as witnesses today against you that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore, choose life, that you and your descendants may live. Again, God is offering choices with consequences. I believe that it is His intention for us to govern our children in that same way in which He governs us. Unfortunately, one main thing some fathers have ever known is control. They were controlled by the parents and have continued to using the same methods with their children. Let me illustrate this point just a little further. Bill grew up under a system of control with his parents. Consequently, when he married when he married and had children of his own, he governed his children the only way he knew, through control. This resulted in tremendous rebellion and a very strained relationship with his oldest son, Bob. Later, in teenage years, one night when Bob was 17, he locked the door of his room and turned up loud a CD playing a type of music his father had forbidden to even be in the house. Bill, the father, came upstairs to his son's room to tell him to turn off that music. As he approached the room, he discovered that only had his son's rebellion manifested in loud, forbidden music, but he also discovered smoke billowing out from under the door. Bill was pretty certain this was not ordinary tobacco smoke, but that it was instead marijuana smoke. Incensed, Bill knocked at the door, ordering Bob to let him in. There was no response. Bill began to pound on the door, shouting at the top of his lungs, demanding his son to open the door this minute. The music only got louder. Furious, Bill stormed back downstairs, not knowing what to do. The next morning, when Bob came down for breakfast, there was his dad waiting for him at the table. Bill verbally tore into Bob, telling him what a worthless human being he was, and expressing sheer hatred through his eyes and voice intonation. Bob endured the tongue lashing while eating his breakfast further, hardened his heart against his dad, and left for school without uttering one word in response. If one would have suggested to Bill at this point that he should conduct a ceremony to bless his son and release him into manhood, he would not have been able to do so because of the offense, hurt, frustration, and hatred and his father toward his son. Not long after this incident, a friend of Bill shared with him the concept of separating identity from behavior and governing his household through exercise of authority rather than control. As Bill meditated on what his friend had said to him, the Lord really smote his heart regarding the years of cursing his son's identity in an attempt to control his behavior. Bill wept bitterly before the Lord and determined to change his way of relating to Bob. The next day, Bill took his son aside and apologized to him for his anger, condemnation, and lack of honor of Bob's right to make a choice. He then explained to Bob the concept of governing through the exercise of authority rather than control. He told him that from now on he would offer Bob choices with consequences, rather than try to force his will on Bob. Bill told his son, for example, Bob, regarding this matter of locking yourself in your room and not responding to your mother and me, I want to explain to you about two choices you have. When your mother or I come to knock on the door, you could choose choice A or choice B. Choice A would be to open the door and discuss with us whatever matter is at hand. The consequences of this choice is that you will continue to enjoy the same privilege regarding your room as you do now. On the other hand, you could choose choice B, which is to leave the door locked and not respond to your mother and me. The consequence of this choice is that you will lose some of the privilege you now enjoy regarding your room. I highly recommend choice A. I believe this is a much better choice. Bob, do you understand your choices? Yeah, whatever, Bob muttered. Of course, the next evening, Bob decided to test out the new system. He went into his room, turned up the music, and smoked his smoke. Bill went upstairs and knocked on his son's door. There was no response. Oh, I guess he's chosen choice B, Bill thought to himself. Oh well, I'll check one more time just to make sure. Bill knocked on the door again and called Bob's name. The music got louder. Yep, he chosen choice B, Bill thought as he returned back downstairs to continue reading the book in which he had become engrossed. The next morning, Bob came down for breakfast. He was shocked to be greeted pleasantly by his father. Bill, Bill continued in pleasant conversation, asked Bob what about the day he had planned. What have you got going on at school today, Bob? Bob told him about various classes and activities for the day. He mentioned that he would be home at about 6 p.m. after soccer practice. His father then remarked, God sure has gifted you at soccer, Bob. I wouldn't be surprised if you earned a full scholarship to university in soccer. Well, God bless you. Have a wonderful this page to come open. Have a wonderful day. Bob walked out of the house totally shocked. What happened to Dad? He mused. Maybe he got saved. Bill, of course, had been a Christian for many years. At about 6 p.m. that evening, Bob arrived home. His dad cheerfully greeted him from the living room as he passed him on his way up to his bedroom. About 50 seconds later, Bob came running back down to the living room, exclaiming, Dad, Dad, there's no door on my room. I know, remarked Bill. I was explaining to you about that day before yesterday. Remember? Choice A and choice B. Last night you chose choice B. I explained to you that if you prefer choice B, then you would lose some privilege regarding your room. Apparently, you thought that having a door on your room was a right. but in actuality, it was a privilege. You have lost that privilege for the next couple of weeks. So if you, so if your mother or I have an issue we need to discuss with you, we'll be able to do so as needed. I personally would have thought that choice A would have been a better choice. If you remember, I did recommend choice A. However, you chose B, and that's fine too. God bless you, son. Have a nice evening. This was the first of many experiences that proved to rebuild relationship between this father and son. The father learned how to separate identity from behavior so that he could love, accept, and bless his son. At the same time, he disciplined his behavior. Many fathers are unable to bless their children at the time of puberty because they have destroyed relationship with them through governing by Satan's system of control. At the time of puberty, the child is already alienated in his her heart from the father, and the father is offended, hurt, angry, and not able to bless and release. Because of negative behavior, he feels compelled to continue to force and control. A third reason that some fathers are unable to bless their children at the time of puberty is that they have never received that blessing themselves, and thus have an inability to give that which they have not received. I recently heard a story just such a situation. A pastor reached a young a pastor had reached a young woman with the gospel, and she gave her life to Christ. This young woman, by age 26, had been involved in great immorality and promiscuity for about the last 10 years. As the pastor then began to counsel with her, he said, "Let's pray and ask the Lord what the root of all the immorality is your life is." She responded, "Pastor, we don't even need to pray. I know exactly when and how it started." "You do?" he exclaimed. "Tell me about it." "It started shortly after my 16th birthday," she said. "I grew up in a pastor's home, and my parents were quite strict. We were not allowed to go out on dates until we were 16. All my friends could date at 14, so I thought that this was really unfair. However, finally, my 16th birthday came, and a young man did invite me out on a date. I was so excited because this would be my first date. I was also quite apprehensive, wondering whether he would like me and if I were really a woman. The day of the day of the date finally arrived. I spent several hours getting ready. I wanted to look just right. About a half hour before the young man was to pick me up, I came downstairs into the living room where my father was reading the newspaper. I just needed some kind of affirmation from him that I looked okay and that I really was a woman and not a foolish little schoolgirl. I came into the room and asked him, "Daddy, how do I look?" Without even looking up from the newspaper, he muttered something unintelligible. I tried again, moving the to the side so he could see me from around the paper. He moved the paper to block eye contact. I asked Dad, "Do I look all right?" "Yeah, fine," he said. "Dad, do you think he'll like me?" Again he muttered something unintelligible from behind the newspaper. "Dad, do you want to meet him?" I queried. "No, you go on," he replied. Shortly after the doorbell rang, and I left with the young man. "Pastor," she said, "I know that as a young woman I desperately needed my father's love and approval that night to bring security to the haunting question: was I a real woman? When he wouldn't give it, I shut him out of my life and went looking for the affirmation of my womanhood from other men. When I closed the door to my house that night, as I left on the date, I also closed the door of my heart to my father. I said in my heart, if he won't pay any attention to me, then I don't need him, and I won't pay any attention to him. The pastor then asked the young woman, I know your father. He and I have been in ministries, fellowships together for years. Would you mind if I called him and asked him to meet with the two of us? I like that very much, said the young woman. The pastor then called the father and requested a meeting together with his daughter. The father was overjoyed and said, we've been praying for her for over 10 years. Yes, I'd love to meet with you. On the day of the meeting, the pastor asked the young woman to share with her father the things that he had shared with him earlier. She began, Dad, you may not even remember this evening, but it was very important to me. It was the night of my first date. I came down to the living room and you were reading the paper. The father stopped her there and began to fill in the details himself. The pastor, shocked, asked the father, if you remember that evening in so much detail, why didn't you give your daughter the blessing she was so desperately looking for? Tears then began to stream down the father's cheeks. Turning to his daughter, he began to share with her, Honey, it wasn't because I didn't love you or didn't know what you were after that evening that I didn't give you what you needed. You see, I never received from my father any affirmation of my manhood. As a result, I found myself that evening a frightened little boy required to do something which only a man could do. When you came downstairs, I didn't know how to relate to you. It seemed like only yesterday that we rocked you in a cradle. How could you have grown up so quickly? I knew how to relate to you as a little girl, but I was scared to death to suddenly find myself relating to a 16-year-old woman. I didn't want you I didn't want you to see the scared little boy looking out through my eyes. So I just hid my behind the newspaper and prayed for the moment to pass quickly. I felt so inadequate and insecure as a father that I didn't want you to see what was going on inside me. Honey, I'm so sorry that I didn't give you what you desperately required that evening. Could you please find it in your heart to forgive me? The daughter burst into tears and fell into her father's arms and cried, Oh, Daddy, I didn't know. I thought it was because you didn't care about me. By this time, all three of them were in tears, and God worked a tremendous reconciliation in that family that day. When should, excuse me, need some water. Okay. When should the blessing ceremony be conducted? Very important. In the Jewish culture, the bar mitzvah ceremony usually takes place at age 13. I believe that the right time for the bar Barakah ceremony is the child is coming into puberty, as is frequently done with the Jewish phrase bar mitzvah. I will primarily use only the male form bar barakah as a generic term to signify usage either for a man or woman. This will be somewhat different for different people. In general, it will be between age 12 and 15. This depends upon the emotional maturity of the son or daughter. For example, my children are just approaching this age now. I have delayed this ceremony in my life of my older son because I can see that he has not been ready. The right time for him will be a little while after his 15th birthday. On the other hand, my younger son will be ready right at the age of 13. It is the job of parents to observe his own children and determine when is the right time. When you can tell it is right when the child begins to take an interest in the opposite sex. It is thinking about more long-term goals and less interest in childish pursuits of the past. Just realize that there is no set age, but rather that it will be different for each child. What about single moms and step parents? You may be asking at this point, well, what about single moms? Who can bless and release her children? This, unfortunately, is one of the tragedies of divorce in our culture. Many times, the legitimate authority ordained by God to speak into the lives of his children, namely the father, is unavailable. If he is truly unwilling or unavailable to be involved in the lives of his children in this way, then it is the job of the pastors and elders of the church to minister to the widows and orphans. This is where the godly men of the church need to come alongside such a family and help impart to the children what the father is unavailable to impart. Many times, God will also use other key family members, such as a grandfather or uncle. If you are a single mom, seek the Lord as to whom He would want to use in the lives of your children to impart this blessing at the time of puberty, and wait on the Lord to see whom He is raising up in a relationship. You would want someone fulfilling this role out of a sense of religious duty rather than out of a desire in his heart to bless. You would not want, and we read that, you would not want someone fulfilling this role out of a sense of religious duty rather than out of a desire in the heart of to bless. As you seek God, He will put the desire to bless in the hearts of the appropriate relatives and Christian leaders. Another question which I am frequently asked is, can a stepfather bless his stepchildren? The answer is yes, especially if the biological father is unavailable. A stepfather has a responsibility to bless his stepchildren. This may well be a key to tearing down any remaining walls of division or estrangement between the stepfather and the son or daughter. So that concludes chapter 3. I hope you got a lot out of this particular chapter and learned quite a bit and the importance of why the father is so integral to the blessing of their children and the importance of it. And I'm sure that there are many watching this right now who did not have fathers, who did not have a father that released the blessing, the ceremonial blessing into manhood or womanhood for them, and they were left with a lot of scars in their hearts, and they have been battling these scars for so long, and these scars, go into so many different areas of life, and you can just see it, just by reading with the one example of the parent did not bless or the parents cursing uh, the child, and the child becomes a father and does the exact same, because it goes from generation to generation to generation. And as you are listening to this message right now, you have the opportunity to break that curse, to break that generational curse and turn it into a blessing so that from you onward there is blessing in your family that is being prosperous in every aspect of their life. And this is why when we begin to have that blessing, we begin to bless others, is why our families will prosper and also our business will prosper. And when we can take these same concepts that we are learning here, and we can apply it to our business and how we relate to other people, and then perhaps we'll be able to begin to grow exponentially in our businesses as well. So go ahead and message me, make a comment, like, subscribe. Let me know what your thoughts are about all of this, and if it's something that you plan to do with your own children or even in your business. And I'd love to hear it from you. And I thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have an awesome, awesome rest of your day. You take care. God bless.